Jade, hello, and welcome to the Reset podcast.
Hi, Ash. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. I feel like finance is one of those topics that we feel is like a big mountain in front of us and really overwhelming, and so we just tend to avoid it, especially as women. So thank you for coming today. I was really excited to have you on because speaking to you about finance just feels like chatting to a friend on a couch that happens to be a financial advisor. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks. And thanks for having me.
Some of our community, they follow you online already, which is awesome. But for anyone that's meeting you for the first time, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Jade. My business is called Bloom Financial Planning. I'm based on the south side, kind of halfway between Brizzy and the Gold Coast, but I have clients all over Australia. So outside of work, I'm a mum of 2 little boys who are 2 and 4. And I have a beautiful husband, so I feel really blessed to have that kind of little network at home, I suppose. Love to get outside. We're a very outdoorsy family. We spend most of our days in the pool. Yesterday we were out fishing half the day, and yeah, just love to get outside and enjoy this Queensland lifestyle that we're so lucky to have.
Oh, epic. Can you tell us the difference between a financial advisor and an accountant?
Absolutely. So I guess I'll start with an accountant, and there's probably 2 types of accountants. So you've got really a tax accountant who is going to be working for someone. You don't have a whole lot of complicated stuff going on, and you go there every year, they process your tax return, you get a refund if you've paid too much, or you have a bill if you haven't paid enough. That's probably most people's understanding. But as soon as you have more complicated situations like a company, a family trust, self-managed super fund, a business, you're going to want to go to them for advice. So they're going to do some forward tax planning for you. They're going to give you advice around structures, what's most tax effective. And especially for small business people, they're going to do your bookkeeping. They're going to make sure you stay out of trouble from that perspective. So they're very tax focused, but they might still give you some business advice. Financial planner, where we work with all of those people as well, but we have a different spin on things. So we want you to earn as much money as we possibly can make for you. Yeah, sure, we're going to be worried, or not worried, but we're going to take tax into consideration, but it's not our first port of call. Like, we're going to be kind of, who cares, pay a bit of extra tax. Like, we want you to build some wealth, you know, where I guess accountants and financial advisors kind of stop crossing over is we give advice around superannuation, around investing, whether it be ETFs or investment properties, whatever that looks like. And one of the most important things I think too is personal insurance, so your life insurances, all those sort of things. So we want to build your wealth as quickly as we can with you, and your accountant is probably going to be working with us to make sure we're doing that tax effectively, because there are a few professionals that we can get you half the way there, but we need them to come in and do their part. So we can't give you tax advice, and we would refer you on then to your accountant to kind of fill that gap in the puzzle piece.
Okay, awesome. I'm excited. I feel like our listeners are going to love this. Today, let's cover property, let's cover HEX debt, let's cover investing, like all the things.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Let's do it.
And even the question around how do I plan for retirement and superannuation, like all these things.
Yeah.
Tell me, if someone's listening and they're like, I love finance, I want to become a financial advisor, what's the path that they should take?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a process. So you do need to do a uni degree, a full-time 3-year uni degree. After that, you're going to do a professional year. So you're going to go in, be employed as a junior financial advisor, or they call it an associate. And you're going to be, a 12-month program where you're going to have some supervision, you're going to have some lessons and courses work to do. Then at the end of that 12 months, you do a end of year, I guess, financial advisor exam, which if you pass that, then you can be enrolled on the financial advisor register, which is monitored by ASIC, and every single financial advisor is listed on there. So I guess that's an important thing for your listeners as well, if they are engaging a financial advisor, to go online and check the financial advice register. You can literally Google financial advisor register. It will be the first thing that comes up, and there will be a list of, you search your advisor's name in, or you can search by area if you're looking for an advisor, and essentially it's going to give you their employment history. You can see how long they've been an advisor for, you can see if they've ever got themselves into trouble, you can see what products and strategies they're licensed to give advice on, because there are some specialist strategies that you need to be separately licensed. Well, not so much licensed, but have separate accreditations. So, for example, self-managed super funds, that's a separate little course on its own that you need to have an accreditation for before you can give that advice. So depending on what you're looking for, just check the register to make sure that that advisor can actually cover the things you want them to.
Okay, that's really good advice because I feel like social media is full of self-acclaimed financial gurus.
Absolutely.
But in Australia, it's a bit strict now, isn't it? Like to be able to call yourself a financial advisor.
Yeah, it is. It is really strict. It's actually, if you do call yourself a financial advisor, you'll find yourself in a lot of trouble if you're not listed on the financial advisor register. So yeah, I mean, we're dealing with people's very most private situations, and if we make a mistake, we can really hurt people's livelihoods and long-term prospects, I guess. So it is really important that no one is pretending to be somebody that they're not. And I would also be mindful of like people that are wealth coaches, money coaches, all those sort of things. These are not financial advisors. So these are people that can give you a little bit of information, but you're not going to get personalised advice.
I'm making so many mental notes right now.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We've opened a can of worms.
This is good. This is good. And I know on Instagram and even just through our chats, you've talked about the importance of having kind of a life plan almost in place before setting a financial plan, because it's one thing to say, oh, I want to have all this money and I want to retire or I want to be rich, but understanding what that actually looks like on an individual level. Can you talk to us a little bit about this? If someone's listening and they're thinking, oh, okay, I have no clue what my life or financial plan is. Yeah. Where do they even start?
So a lot of the times when I first meet a client, I'll say, what do you want your life to look like in 12 months? So some people have like an immediate problem where they're like, I hate my job, but I earn so much money. I need to know like, what sort of pay cut can I take? Like I need to get out of what I'm doing. Or then I'll sort of say, right, what's the 5-year plan? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you have young kids? What are they doing in 5 years' time? What do you want to be able to do? Do you want to be able to take 6 months off and travel Australia? Like what do you want to do? You know, life's not just all about working. You've got to have something else to look forward to. And then the ultimate one is sort of like, where do you want to be in 10 years' time? Because that's what we're building basically towards. I think financial planning is absolutely not a short-term game. It's changing your perspective on your future, in my opinion, and setting a path for your future that you're like, right, this is where we want to be and this is how we're going to get there. Any client can come to me and say, hey, we want to invest in shares and hey, we want an investment property because we want to have future wealth. But what does that actually mean? Because it's just a term that gets thrown around everywhere. And is future wealth to you working part-time while you have children? Or is it retiring at 50? Or is it just having the opportunity to have an annual overseas trip? Like, what does that actually look like? And then we can just run some numbers and say, right, you need to make sure that we're doing this to get you to where you want to be in the future.
I love that. Or is it the yacht and the holiday house
Absolutely.
in France? Like, what is this? Okay.
Can't give you advice on the French holiday house. Australian assets only.
Okay.
But if you know what you need to get you over there, we can help you.
Okay, I love that. With that future wealth in mind, what are your thoughts on, do we need to pay off all of our debts before we begin investing?
Yes and no. So it's dependent on the type of debt you have. If you're someone who's got buy now, pay later schemes, definitely want to clear those up. If you've got credit card debt, we want to clear that up. So anything that's short-term high interest, we want to clear that out as much as we can. The only thing, don't worry too much about your mortgage because that is going to be there long term, and there are strategies later on in life that we can use to help clear that as you age. But yeah, you want to clear up any small short-term debts, personal loans, car loans, all that sort of stuff. We want to try and get that down as much as we can because a part of that is having as well like an emergency buffer. We want to have a bit of cash stashed away somewhere that we're not touching so that if something happens and we're off work for a few weeks, we lose our job all of a sudden, that we're not going to be stressed about how we're going to pay for all that debt that we have before we look at investing, because investing is definitely for the long term and it's not money that we want to touch. We want to know that it can sit there for 7, 8, 9, 10 plus years and we're not going to be using it.
If someone is listening and has a goal of, you know what, I haven't been investing yet or I've dabbled a little bit, but investing is something I really want to do in 2025, how do we get started?
Yeah, good question. So if you've never explored this before, I would encourage you to read a few different books. So not necessarily my favorite, but I do like it because it's very basic and easy for people to implement strategies from. The Barefoot Investor, great book to start with. So it's going to give you all the basics because there are a few things that you want to have lined up before we start investing. So like what we're talking about, we want to clear some debt. We want to know your cash flow. You want to know how much spare money you can put into this investment every single week. So we don't want to sort of oh, I'll put $100 in here and there and hope for the best. If it's something that you want to do, you probably need to have a bit of a strategy behind it. So knowing what your budget looks like, having a bit of spare money to put away, doing some research. There is a Money Smart website, government website, so everything on it is done by the government, so it's trustworthy. There is a whole heap of basic information around investing on there. The easiest thing for people to access when it comes to investing is exchange traded funds, so ETFs, which are basically a collection of shares. You don't need to pick them, they're already picked for you, and they're traditionally going to be in the top, if it's Australia, they're going to be in the top 200 companies in Australia, so that with enough certainty that they should be pretty good. We're not speculating, right? We're not going out and we're not going, oh, here's this new fund or this new share that's just been listed on the ASX. It sounds pretty cool. I'm interested in what they're doing. And then we put all our money into it and then it doesn't do what we were hoping it to do. So we want to spread that risk out as much as possible. It's sort of, if you think about going to like the farmer's market on the weekend and you go and you're like, oh, that looks like a good apple. It's really expensive, but it's okay. I'm gonna use all my money on that one apple. You buy your apple, you take it home, you turn it over and it's rotten on the other side and we've just used all our money. When you could have gone in and said, right, I'm going to get the basket of the day of the fruit and the veggies, take it home, okay, the carrots are no good, but the apples are good. There's a few rotten pieces in the bottom, but for the most part, we've got most of our basket left. So that's diversification, spreading our risk that we'll still have something at the end of the day if something goes wrong along the way. So that's probably an important thing to be mindful of when it comes to investing. Don't just go and pick a whole heap of different stuff. We want to look for things that are well diversified. So you really want to just start with a book, just start to get your head around investment concepts. Have a look. Look, there are a few online Instagram pages, TikTok, whatever your interest is, that's going to get you some good general knowledge, but we don't necessarily want to be listening to the specific products that they're sharing because they're not really supposed to have a vested interest these days, but it's really hard when you are mentioning product names. As financial advisors, we can't do that at all. We don't want to influence people into things that might not be appropriate for them without knowing their whole needs and their whole lifestyle. So start with a book, a little bit of online research, go from there. Engage a financial advisor if you feel that you are ready. Obviously, it's not a cheap exercise to do, but if you are someone who is serious, that really wants to go, okay, I'm keen on investing, I want to plan for my future and do all of these things, then it's well worth it.
All right, so I'm reading Barefoot Investor and going on the Money Smart website.
Yep.
Okay, we'll link to all of these in the show notes.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
No. No. Look, there are, like I said, a few online Instagram accounts. I'm not going to mention any names because everyone kind of has a different, interest in things, but it's just worth having. Just browse the internet, start there, get a little bit of general knowledge, start to ask your friends, what do they do? Like, it's a conversation that you have to kind of engage with your friends because they're not going to be forthcoming, but they might know a lot and you might be able to learn from them around you. So we're not taking product advice from any friends, any barbecues, but to try and understand the concept of investing, then we can start there.
Okay, and Google ETFs.
Google ETFs, yeah.
Love it.
You might get a bit confused, but, you'll find your way around. The more you read, the more you learn. It's just like anything, learning for the first time. Give yourself, you can say, in 6 months' time, I want to start investing. Like, don't go and read something and then go and try it tomorrow. Give yourself time to absorb all the information and make an informed decision about what you're going to invest in.
Okay, great advice. Thank you.
No worries.
Let's talk about HEX debt for a second.
Yep.
Is that something we should be paying off early? Is it something that I can just set and forget?
Yeah, controversial topic. So there's obviously a lot of talk, especially on the online forums, about do we pay it, do we not? So it's the only debt in Australia that will die with you. So I think there's a bit of a, oh, well, it'll just kind of do its thing in the background and when I'm old it'll be gone sort of thing. I hope people are not taking that on. But personally, the way I approached my HEX debt was like any other loan. So it's sold in Australia as an interest-free loan from the government, which, yes, sure, it is, but it does index. So it increases over time with inflation. And there are some new rules coming in that they're legislating and changing the HEX, but it's going to affect a couple of things for you. Every time you get a pay rise, you're going to lose a bit of that pay rise to your HEX debt. If you go for a mortgage, you're going to have lesser of a borrowing capacity because of that HEX debt. And if you're someone that's wanting to get a home loan, have a chat with a mortgage broker about how your HEX affects your home loan. So some people have chosen not to pay it off and others have chosen to. I approached mine like any other debt and I paid it off as quickly as I could because I didn't want to give up any of my pay rises. Look, I was single, young, no dependents. Like that is the best time to get rid of it. If you are listening and you're 20 and you're finishing up or just going through uni, just try and get rid of it. Otherwise it could be there for a very long time. It will get in your way. If you have children and you work part-time, it's always going to be hanging over your head. So a story I share with a lot of people is I have a client who I think her debt started at $50,000 when she finished up everything. She then moved overseas. So she's been gone around maybe 15 years, maybe more. Her debt's now $80,000. She's living out of the country. She doesn't have an Australian tax return. She doesn't need to pay her HECS debt. She's thinking about coming back to Australia. So the challenge there is, well, how do we clear this loan, significant loan, and build our life again in Australia? So there's sort of some things like if you're in your, like I said, come out of uni, you're in your early 20s and you're like, let's go for a gap year to London. Like, great. So many people do that. But so many people end up being over there for like 5-10 years. Maybe they get married. Maybe they stay over there. If you're coming back in the future, it's only going to grow. So I would encourage people just, if you have the money to do it, to just get rid of it, move on and build up your savings from there. Obviously, the cost of living and everything that's going on in the economy right now, be kind to yourself because it is harder than it's ever been to get ahead in life. But if you can just put a little bit extra off your HECS along the way and you pay it off a few years earlier than you otherwise would have, it will help you in the long run.
Superannuation.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't sound sexy or fun. Tell me, what do we need to know about super? And should we be doing anything proactive? Like what? Give me Super 101.
Absolutely. So super is a very misunderstood concept in Australia. Our employer, as we know, will put in 11.5% of our salary into super. It goes into the abyss and we don't see it until we retire, right? Hopefully today we might change some minds on that. So I have been giving retirement advice to clients for many years now. So I've been giving advice to people that are kind of 55 plus wanting to move into retirement and those that have already retired. They all tell me it comes around quicker than you could have ever imagined. And there is a huge difference in the quality of their retirement between those who paid attention to their super and put a little bit extra in versus those that didn't. So I'll start with why it's important. Do you know how much the age pension is per fortnight for a couple in Australia?
Nope.
$850 each.
A fortnight?
A fortnight.
Oh my goodness.
So we're living on less than $900 a week, right? Slightly more if you're single, it's around $1,000 per fortnight. But yeah, it's not much. So in Australia, there's a huge gap at the moment between that generation that has retired, never really had super. The ones coming through kind of had it later in their careers, and our generation had it from day one. So the retirement is going to look very different for those two groups of people. But what we do know is if we don't pay attention to our super early, by the time we sort of realise that 50 or 55 that we should be paying attention, we're so far behind the eight ball, it's hard to catch up. So this is one of those things that we want to, if you don't feel like you have extra money to put into your super now, at least have a look, know where your super is, know who your super product is with. Go on your MyGov website, it will have a list of your super funds. If you have more than one, don't be in a hurry to consolidate them. So that is a big thing in this country. There's a lot of advice about consolidating super funds to save on fees. If you have an industry super fund, which is most Australians who just take on whatever their work offers them, you're going to be paying pretty low admin fees for the most part. The other part of that is fees are also percentage based. So it's just going to be the percent of a fee that's in each of these balances. So we're not doubling up. We might be doubling up on the admin fee, but some of the admin fees in industry super funds are less than $100 a year. So it's not a huge amount. The importance behind that is the life insurance or the income protection or whatever is inside it that you may not be able to get in the future. So go and have a look. How many super funds do you have? Go and see if you can consolidate them. Again, you might need to get advice around this, but just be conscious of what the insurance is within them. Go and pay attention to where it's invested. So go in, Google your, if you're in a balanced fund or whatever that is, go and understand what that means. So a balanced fund technically will have around 60% in growth investment, so that's your shares and property, and 40% in cash and fixed interest, which is kind of the more defensive or safer options for when the market is going to be giving you all that volatility. So you just want to know where that is, because if you go in and you're like, oh, all my money is sitting in cash, you're not getting much of a return at all. So that's very unlikely to have happened, but there have been cases where people think they're invested in something and they're actually not where they think their money is. So understanding what your super looks like, where your money is invested, how many super funds you have, because we want to take care of it now. If you have the ability to put in extra, there are some government incentives to be making extra contributions. So just go and have a Google additional superannuation contributions, and there's a lot of information in there about how to do it and what the government might actually give you. So for example, one of them is if you put in $1,000, you'll get an extra $500 put in, but you've got to be earning less than a certain amount of money. So go and check all that information. The other thing is the Australian Super Fund, Association of Australian Super Funds, puts out an annual kind of, if you're retiring right now, this is how much money you need to have. So the age pension is $40,000 a year. Do you want to have a guess at what the government says is a comfortable lifestyle for a couple in retirement to be spending on per annum?
Oh my gosh. I have no idea. You would assume the classic Aussie dream is you own your own home.
Yep.
Oh, I have no idea. Tell me.
Yeah. So yes, you want to own your own home, and you're going to be spending about $73,000 a year. So we're debt free. That's tax-free money. That's after-tax money, because we want it ideally to be coming out of super. So to get to that point, right now, if you're between in your 40s, 40 to 45, you want to have a balance of around 150,000. The average 45-year-old in Australia is sitting around 100,000. So we're a little bit behind where we actually need to be fully self-funded in retirement. So we're not relying on the age pension. So obviously it will always be there, but things are changing. The generations now that rely on the age pension, that will be totally different for us in the future. And the whole reason why is that the government realised about 30 years ago that our population is ageing, and they just couldn't afford to pay everybody to be on age pension, because that is huge taxpayer dollars that we are talking. So that's when they legislated superannuation, and they ideally wanted to force people to save for their retirement, and the only way they could do that was to introduce some sort of scheme where we put our money away and we couldn't touch it until we retire. So they kind of had the forethought to look after us, and I know a lot of business owners complain about having to pay superannuation and all those sort of things. But when you get to retirement and you're living on a nice superannuation balance, you'll be very thankful you had super growing up.
Okay. And if people are in their 20s and 30s and listening to this and want to know, okay, how much should I have now?
Yeah.
Is there an easy graph somewhere they can
There
look at?
is, yes. So there is a little bit, like the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, they've got a bit of information around that. If you just Google how much super should I have, there will be some. So look for any of the industry funds, like I won't mention any names, but any of those funds that are, there should be stats and blog posts on those websites, because they do a lot of research about superannuation in Australia, and they're on there, they'll be able to say, you should have about this much if you want to retire in the future. And I wouldn't be too caught up around the numbers either. It's more just being aware and putting a little bit in where you can. And as you age over time, we can obviously, your priorities shift, right? You might not think at 20 that you should be doing anything, but personally, I was very lucky that I had somebody when I got my first job at 17, straight out of school, who made me put $20 a week into my super, even though I thought this is ridiculous. But back then, the government would give you $1,500 if you put in $1,000 into your super and you're a low income earner.
Oh,
so,
wow. Okay.
yeah. So, but just by doing that, I've noticed a difference between had I have not done that and people around me that I know haven't done that, and clients, of my age that wouldn't have done that. There's a big difference, and it really, the proof is in the pudding, basically, to say compound interest is your best friend over long term.
Okay, I've got so many notes running through my head.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
After this podcast. What about people that are self-employed?
Yeah.
Give us some super advice, because it's a grey world where our employers are not doing it because we employ ourselves.
Yeah. So if you're a company, legally you need to be. So every quarter you need to be paying it. It's a business expense, so you can claim it as a tax deduction for your business. I approach it as it's just a part of running your business. That it's really important, because if you go and work for 10 years for yourself and you don't make any superannuation contributions, you're going to be so much worse off than had you have just had a job and you just had that paid for you. So I know, because my parents are self-employed and are of that generation where super wasn't a thing when they were young, that it's a very much in Australia, super, they've got to pay super, but it's such a good thing to have for your future. The other thing too, like when we get to retirement, it's tax-free. We can turn it into a tax-free pension. So it's going to make your money last so much longer than if you had to pay income tax on it all the way through. So if we're building our net wealth outside of super, we're investing in property and shares and whatever, great. We're always going to have to pay tax on all of that money all through retirement. If we focus some on super, we're going to have tax-free money later on in life and our money's going to last us longer because of that. So we're just going to have to get used to paying super, unfortunately. Just do it.
Just do it.
You will thank yourself in the future.
Yeah, I love that. And this podcast is often about like, what would the 90-year-old version of me say? And she wants a comfortable life.
Yeah. And that's it. Like, so that's what I was saying. Like, I've helped so many people through that retirement phase. So I've been able to learn off them the things that they did and the things that they didn't do, and to see the difference in their experiences during retirement. Great, we can go on the annual overseas holiday versus, we're going to be lucky to get to the coast this year for Christmas sort of thing. So it does make a huge difference if you are not doing it. We really want to think about it.
Let's jump around a little bit now and talk property.
Yep.
So it's no secret that Australian property is so expensive now. Yeah. What are your thoughts on buying versus renting versus rent vesting?
So I think in terms of when should you buy a place, right? There's no good time. Like right now, obviously things are really expensive, but is this just the new normal? Is this just the next benchmark of the way things are going to be? Or are they going to come down? They probably might normalise a little bit. They probably won't grow as fast as they have over the last 4 years. But all of that aside, if your goal is to get a home, you should do it when you can afford to do it. So go and talk to a mortgage broker, go and find out how much you can borrow. If you can't borrow what you need to borrow in your area where you want to live, go and find out from that mortgage broker how much you need to increase your income to qualify for that sort of loan. Or secondly, you could look at rent vesting. So you could look at buying a property somewhere else and renting where you want to live. So I had a client recently who was like, we love the city lifestyle. We want to stay in an apartment, but we don't want to buy an apartment. So they went and bought a beautiful 4-bedroom family home out in the suburbs somewhere, and now have a roof over their head should they ever want to move out to that place. They've got an investment that will grow over time, so they're building their wealth whilst they're renting somewhere else. So I think that's become much more of the norm, especially in the last few years, because the places, especially around Brisbane, that you look back and go, oh my gosh, we should have bought 2 houses back then. Like, it's become much more of the norm because people are realising that, okay, we should do something and we should get property, like the great Australian dream. We all want to have our own place, but we can't necessarily afford to do it where we want to live, and the convenience of our lifestyle and whatnot, it can be a really good option to do that.
Talking about retirement, how much money do we need to retire, or how do we even work that out?
Yeah, that is such a good question. There are so many numbers out there, the $1 million or this, that and the other. That website that I was talking about before, the Association of Super Funds Australia, has a lot of information on that, which is proper data that has been collected from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and a whole heap of other places that will give you some good information. You can Google some calculators that will predict how much money that you'll have in retirement, or how much that you would need. You can put in sort of, okay, we want to live on $1,000 a week. What sort of balance do we need at retirement? So it's going to be different for everybody because everybody has different lifestyle expenses. So I would just encourage you to put a little bit, the whole theme of this is just put a little bit more into super than you are if you're not doing anything, because that will help significantly along the way. And it's something that, you can always sit down and review it. If you're looking to get financial advice, that's what we do. So we will sit down with you. We might not do it with a 30-year-old because that 30-year-old has young kids and has a mortgage and has other things they want to achieve before they get to retirement. But it's going to be there in the back of our minds to say, right, what do we want your life to look like? 10 years, 20 years? How are we going to do this? And we can run some projections around that sort of stuff. But yeah, my go-to would be Google some calculators to see what that might look like. And also Google There's some around, I'm sure, like especially the industry funds will have calculators that you can put a random balance in. Like you could put 500,000 in, put your living expenses in and see how long that would last for. So that will give you a gauge on, you know, how much you want to build that to.
All right. There's so many things that we've discussed today that I'm like, well, why didn't they teach us this in school?
Yeah.
So if you could change the school curriculum and there were, say, 3 things that we were taught 15 years ago, what would they be?
Yeah, so definitely super, number one, because it's going to be the biggest thing that, for most Australians, it's the biggest asset that we'll ever own by the time we get to retirement. Investing, concepts around investing. So not just like, you know, how do you invest in shares and whatnot, but how do you build a share portfolio effectively, or how do you build a property portfolio effectively? And then the third one is probably more around helping give people more maybe self-confidence, because a lot of spending that I see is kind of coming in from lifestyle creep. We get a better job, we get a bigger house, we start to wear designer, we try and keep up with our friends, but we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, whether our friends are funding that from a lot of debt or whether they're inherited grandma's property portfolio and now they're quite wealthy and you just don't know. So I think a lot of the stuff that I see, especially amongst young people, is that kind of trying to keep up with the Joneses or keep up with the Kardashians type thing. A lot of unnecessary spending and just not having financial goals. So to teaching kids how to set financial goals and be really clear on those and how that can help them for their future.
And if there was just one thing that the listeners took away from our conversation today, what would you want them to remember?
Okay, so maybe not so much financial planning stuff, but just understand your why. Why do you go to work every day? What's it giving you in your life? And what do you every day we go and trade our time for money. And that might be doing that self-employed, that might be doing that on an employed basis. But what are we getting in return and what are we spending our money on? And it doesn't make us happy. Do we have a house full of stuff that we don't really care about? And would we rather have the flexibility at the end of the year to take an extra 2 weeks of annual leave, or to do an overseas holiday with our family, or to work part-time while you have young kids? Like, just understand your why. Why are you doing it? What are you trying to achieve? Where do you want to go? And I think that'll help along the way. Like, we talk about money values, like, are we buying things that actually make our life better? I think like a lot of people that are in that young kids situation, they're working in the city, commuting. A lot of those people value convenience, which might be an expensive period of buying pre-prepared food, things like that. If you understand your values and your why and what you're trying to achieve in life, I think that'll set you on the right path to really sit down and question yourself. Think about your goals. What are you actually trying to do? Because it's really easy to remortgage your house for a couple of $100,000 and do this beautiful extension. And now we're going to have a really big debt and we're going to have to stay in that job we don't really like for a lot longer.
On that note, blending the life with the finance and all the good stuff, when life starts to get hectic and crazy and busy for you, what's your favourite way to reset?
I knew you were going to ask. I run, which is not like a relaxing reset, I suppose. So I used to be a track and field athlete, and now I just love putting my earphones in and just going for a run, just not thinking about anything. You know, we have young kids, we both have our own businesses, life is super busy, and just trying to get pockets of time to just be me again, be that old me that had no commitments, and run and just run.
I love it.
Yeah, I love a good massage too, because, you know, running makes you a bit sore, so they go hand in hand.
Both excellent ways to reset.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of books earlier.
Yeah.
Is there a book that has made a positive impact on your life that you think everyone should have on their shelf?
And there's a bit of a theme to this discussion. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, I think you pronounce his last name. It talks to all of those things about not keeping up with your friends, caring about the things you really value in life, understanding why consumerism is the way we do. Yeah, that sort of mindset shift, I think, is really important. Probably the best first stepping stone, because the money stuff you can teach anybody quite quickly. It's the mindset behind it. Like, I can give you the best financial plan and I can say, look, you are going to be so wealthy. But if I tell you to buy an investment property or invest in shares, and they're things that you think are boring, they're worthless, they're more pain than they are gain sort of thing, you're not going to stick to the plan. So you really want to understand your own behaviours and your own psychology of money. And one really important thing that I never knew up until the last few years was, do you know that by the time we're 7, we've made up our money beliefs? So we're watching our parents, we're watching our friends, and that's how we are going to grow up around money, and quite often is how we view money in the future. So if you've grown up around people that spend a lot of money, probably going to spend a lot of money. So I think sometimes it takes a lot of self-work to try and work out, where are my money beliefs coming from? That book is a really good starting point to that.
I love that. And it's about drawing a line in the sand and then consciously choosing as I move forward, what do I actually want my money beliefs to be like? What is a rich life to me, and what is happiness and success?
Absolutely. And I think sometimes people don't really, I get couples quite often, right? And, it's really hard to blend couples together because we all have competing goals. I had a client that wanted to travel the world, but their partner wanted an investment property. The budget was about the same that we needed to spend on those things, so there had to be a little bit of compromise. And I had a different one whose partner grew up on the farm. And so if you know anything about farming, it's seasonal. So one year there might be a good year, and then we might be in 4 years of drought and there's no money. So having that emergency fund that we talk about and the money is stashed away in the family farm, being careful, being budgeted, versus his partner who grew up quite well off and was just able to buy whatever they want whenever they wanted, was creating quite a lot of conflict because there was a lot of spending on one behalf and saving on the other. So yeah, just working together to try and blend out those goals and values. But we don't really know why we're like that, right? Because we grew up, that's the way we grew up and that's all we know. We don't know any different. So it can take a bit of work just to unravel some of that stuff.
Oh my gosh, it's so interesting. I feel like there's 3 more podcasts we could have
just
talking about.
I need a psychology degree really, but it all goes hand in hand. Behavioural finance is a big driver behind the decisions that we make.
Oh my God, so good. All right, Jayde, once we've read the books, we've been on those websites. If people are thinking, okay, I've done all that self-learning, now I want to come and work with a financial advisor, how can people get in touch with you online?
Yeah, so you can, I'm on Instagram, Bloom Financial Planning. If you look me up there, website, Bloom Financial Planning, you'll be able to find me. Again, just Google. Google it, you'll find me.
Thank you so much. We'll put all of those links in the show notes as well. But Jayde, thank you for spending time in the studio with me today. I really appreciate it. I've learnt a lot and I feel like the Reset listeners have learnt a lot too. So
yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me.